Great to have you back in the fourth lesson of our tutorial about the rasterizer in Houdini. My name is Helge Maus from pixeltrain. After we finished now the material assignment, I want to make this scene now render ready. And for this, we first want to add a camera so that we directly see what we get later in, for example, After Effects or Nuke. So for this, you can look for a nice perspective, and then if you go to the first shelf here, lighting cameras, you can hold down the control key while clicking on camera, and so the camera is placed exactly at the position where you are placed. And you see we have a new camera here with the name Cam1. I can rename this directly. And also we have this camera now here in this drop-down menu. And if you now want to readjust the position of the camera, you have to make sure that you lock your viewer into the camera. Otherwise, I demonstrate this for a moment. You see, you go out of the position of the camera and you will see the camera at this point here. So there's no real connection between this camera in the moment and your viewport. So if you really want to have this connection, select your shot cam again and lock this. And then you can move yourself. But you also can use this handle here, which is really nice, so that you can place your camera from this point of sight here. And so we change now the perspective of our camera a little bit. And if you are happy with this now, then you can go out of the locked mode and now you don't destroy your camera anymore. If you look through this here around the camera settings, you see under render, there's nothing really fancy here. Under view, you see the resolution. This is important. Normally, you set your resolution here in the camera if you want. You can override it later in Mantra, but here is your camera resolution if you need it. Here's the focal length for your shot, the clippings, and so on. So it's really clear what you find here. In the next step now, we want to set up our renderer. And if you remember, when you go here to the render view and tick render, our renderer worked. We don't had a camera in our scene and we don't had a mantra node. And so Houdini was so kind for us to build us a mantra IPR node for the progressive renderer here, and it used a ROP camera. Now we can select our shot camera here because now we have a camera. But we need also our own mantra node. And for this, we go into the out context here. And here's the IPR, which Houdini has added for us. And if you want now a new render node, I press the tab key and right here, I need another mantra node. I name this mantra underscore PBR. And then we also can select this mantra node here as now the preview mantra node, and so you get a connection between these two worlds. Let us take a look into the mantra node. We start here in the top part. You see here you can connect a camera with your mantra. That's really good. We go here and select our shot camera, and like promised, you can override your camera resolution here if you need. So for test renderings, really often you go here and halve the resolution, or you can have a user resolution if you like, but in my case, the standard resolution is okay. Then we have here many tabs. We start here with the image. This is the image you want to write out, and you see here Mantra uses a lot of variables, and these variables depend on your project settings. And if you go here to the edit menu, you find here aliases and variables, and here you can check which variables are in place at the moment. For example, this variable $hip is here, and you see this here is my project in which I work, and I started with setting up a project under file here, and so that's the reason why I ended here. If you want to use the hip name, so that's the name you gave your hip file, you find it here, and also you have here job and so on. So if you want to see what these variables are, you can use them. I tend to change a little bit this name. Normally you go into your project, go into the render folder, and then it uses the hip name $OS is really important. It's the operator strings, the name you give here, your node. And then you see $F4 means mantra things you want to make an animation, and you get a number scheme with 4 digits, and it's EXR in the moment. You can change your location here by selecting here a new path. But in my case, I know that this folder is correct, but I don't want to use the hip name here. I want to have a new folder here, which uses the name $OS. Like I've said, that's the name of the camera. And this is good practice in bigger projects. If you, for example, have 3 or 4 mantra nodes which have different jobs to do, you get a subfolder in the render folder for every of these cameras, which are exactly named like the node, so you know what you expect here. And then you can have your hip name, and yeah, I can remove the OS here. And if this folder doesn't exist, it's no problem, because here through this tick create directories, you get directly a new directory if the directory is not there. Okay. EXR is the file format I want to use. That's good. We can now change here some settings if you want. The only setting I want to change is under metadata. EXR is a file format which is used in visual effects a lot, and if you comp in Nuke like I do a lot, this setting here is good. But if you want to comp now in, for example, Adobe After Effects, Adobe After Effects can't really work with data windows inside of EXRs. So some stuff is missing, and if you want to deactivate the data window, you don't find an option here. To add this option, we have to add more parameters to this tab. And like we've did in the subnet, you can go here to this little cogwheel, say edit the parameters, and now you have all the parameters which are on this mantra node. And if you go here now to the render properties, you see there's a lot more render options under a mantra node, but finding here something is really hard. You have to know what you are searching, and we need EXR options. And for this, you can use the filter here. If you go here and write EXR and this little asterisk here and press enter, you only get the options here which are about EXR stuff, and here is the EXR data window. If you select this, a whole bunch of data window options comes with it. You can add this now to your list, and if you now go to accept, you see here are the new options. So there are many more options you normally don't need, but you can add more options. And then for Adobe After Effects, I go in here and deactivate the EXR data window. In other applications like Nuke, it's absolutely okay to use them. Let us go back here to the output. We need image planes. Image planes is multipassing or AOVs. You have some standard AOVs if you like them. For example, position pass, depth pass, for later making depth of field effects, normal pass, and so on. But it seems that this list is really short. But if you want to have more, you can go here and add more image planes, extra image planes to this system. If you tick here the plus sign, you can now add image planes, but you have here to add a VFX variable. VFX, you heard it a lot, is a programming language which we use inside of Houdini for adding stuff, and you can build every path you want as a variable. The Houdini guys are really kind, so they added you a lot of predefined stuff. You see here a whole list. It's a little bit cropped, sorry for this, but if you try it in your Houdini, you will see it. For example, I can use the alpha, and you see there's a VFX variable AF for the alpha, and you can add it like this. And if you need another pass, click the plus sign, and you can add another VFX variable. And we do this in a moment. So I stop here, I delete this for a moment. We go back here to the settings, and now we have finished the image. For this moment, we go to rendering. And under rendering, we can change now the rendering engine. Mantra comes with some render engines, and if you open this up, you see the render engines. In our case, I want to use PBR, the physical-based rendering engine, so I select this. You can add depth of field and motion blur into the rendering, we want to do it later in post. That's the reason why we have the depth pass and maybe motion vectors and so on. So you don't have to render this into the image. Here's the pixel sampling. I increased this to 4:4, so that's a little bit more noise-free. And here are all the settings for the quality inside of Mantra. So we don't want to talk about this in this tutorial. We go then to objects. This is an extremely powerful system inside of Houdini. You can decide here which objects you want to render with this Mantra node, on which objects you don't want to use, which lights you want to use. And you can see here this wildcard. You see all the candidate objects. Every object is rendered which has the display flag, and absolute every light is used. But this is really powerful if you want to select something, what you want to render with this node. The settings are done. If we now want to render this here in the preview, we can do this by clicking render. This node is used, Mantra PBR and the shot cam. And the moment it starts, you directly see what's going on. You see it refines all the time. This is here these two options. One option here is the refinement, and the other one is this auto update. That means if I change something somewhere, it restarts rendering by itself. So you can change these options here. But I want to see the passes, and there is a little line here, or you see here there's a collapsed window, and if you click this, you get another part of the M-Play window here. Also here, you see it hides here, and in this upper section here are your passes, and you can directly dive into CS, the color pass, beauty pass, for example. You see here, this is the depth information you have, and if you want to compress it into your histogram so that you see everything, you can use this button here, adapt to full pixel range, so you can see this here a little bit better, but deactivate this later so that you really see what you get. Then there's the position pass, the normals, AF, like I've said, is the alpha. And here are two passes which you always have, a primitive ID, the numbers of the IDs, and the operator IDs. So if you go back here, like I've said, this here is a little bit dangerous because it presses the histogram together and you get here a changed appearance. And if you want to go back here, click here this little sun or light source so that you get the colors back. So all the passes are there, which we have defined. But if you are used to work in other programs, for example, like Cinema 4D, you now maybe want to change in post, for example, these plates separately from this here. And in Cinema 4D, it's really easy. You add object ID to these objects and it works really easily. How to do something like that in Houdini? Houdini is much more flexible than other renderers I know and other 3D programs, but sometimes it's a little bit hidden. And so if you want to address these things, you can, for example, decide that you want to address everything which has a material. And these spheres have a different material and different shader than these plates. And this is the hook I want to use for making my own passes at this point. You remember we had here, we go here to the image, to the extra planes, here these vex variables, and these vex variables you can add by yourself. Let us add one. We click here, add, and we name this variable, for example, Multimatte. This is a name you can freely decide. You have to keep in mind that this is a variable, so it has to have some rules in it, but yeah, the name is freely given by me. You have here the type. I want to have a vector because a color is a vector with 3 components. Multimatte. And now I can use this variable to fill in data. And to do that, I go, for this example, into the materials context, in the /mat. And I want to tell that every plate here in the output of this shader defines a value for this multimatte variable. To do that, I want to dive into this shader, and I told you in the last tutorial that this here is like a wrapper, and inside is a whole network for the material. To go inside, you can't make a double click. If you do that, you get this message here that it's really compressed and that you have to allow the editing of the contents. So if you go over this now, right mouse button click, you say allow editing of contents. And the moment you do that, you see there's a little shadow now around this. So you see the difference between these two shaders. And also the lock here is now open, and then you can dive inside. And I press Command B to make this window here full screen, and P to get rid here of the parameters. And you see, yeah, this is a really big network here. And this is the shader which is built inside. And the cool thing is you can add now your own stuff. Don't be afraid. We go to the right side of this shader because there's the output. And you see in this collect here, I press P again to get my parameters back. There everything is collected. And what we do is we add here an own output, and this is wax, and so we can use a bind export node. And a bind export node is for giving parameters informations outside. If you select this node, you see here the name of the variable you want to output. In our case, Multimatte. This was the name we decided that our variable has to be. The type of this here, I don't want to have float. I want to use a vector with 3 components which are float. And after doing that, you see here default value. And in this case, I want to have here 1 in the first channel, which is red, and then 0, 0 for the other channels. So everything which comes from this shader here has red in the variable Multimatte. One thing is important. You normally use this bind export with an input, and if you don't have an input, it normally doesn't export. So under export here, when input is connected, we have to change this to always, so that we always get an output here. And then you can select this node and copy this into your clipboard, Command C, and I press Command B again, go outside, and now we go into our spheres, allow editing of contents, dive in, like I've said, search the right area here, click here to set the focus, paste, there it is, Multimatte is okay, but this time not in the red channel. I want to add everything which comes here from the spheres into the second channel. That's it. We go out. And now we can go back into our renderer, make sure Multimatte is there, it's typed correctly, the vector type is also correct. And if we now render, the shaders are calculated on the surface and they output all their stuff we have set to export. And if we look here into the Multimatte, you see now that these 2 colors come over like we expected. So that's the setup we want to use now. I can stop here the rendering. If you now are finished with your settings, you are happy with this image here and all the settings, you go then here to these buttons here. Here you can tell Mantra which frame range you want to render. If you have an animation, you can have a frame range here. In our case, we want to have a still image. You can directly render to disk. That's cool. It saves directly. Or you can pipe the rendering to mplay, but then you have to remember to save it from there. Or you can render it in background to disk. What's really nice because you can still work in Houdini and it renders in the background. If you want to do this, you want normally to see how far Mantra has gone. And this is the thing I want to show you in the finish of this tutorial. So I click here, render to disk in background. It says, please save. I press Command S to save. Tick it again, and he said, yeah, I'm working. And if you want to see how far it is, you can open here another tab here with this little plus sign, and there's a window which is named Render Schedule. And every rendering you do is here in the list, and you see all are finished. You see they have a -1, but here is a process running since 25 seconds, and here you see this is your rendering. When it's finished, it will change here the flag, and you see that this job is still running in the background. So that's it for this tutorial about the Rasterizer. I hope it was helpful for you I'm happy for your feedback, so if you want to give me a little bit of feedback or wishes for next tutorials, I really appreciate that. Thanks a lot for watching. My name is Helge Maus from pixeltrain.